Oh, that's a good boy. Oh, that's a big dog. Hey, what is up guys? My name is Oleg, this is Bond. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm gonna talk about 5 watches under $50 that are worth the price. So let's get started. Number 5, Timex Weekender. You can pick them up on Amazon all day long at around 30 bucks. A chronograph version is around $55. However, they often go on sale. So you can pick one up for around 50 bucks. I think at that price point, for the brand name that you get, Timex, of course, it's not a high-end name, but it is still well known. Everybody and their grandma knows about Timex. It's a fantastic choice. Now, one of the negatives for these affordable Timex watches is the loud ticking sound, so that's something you have to deal with. If you don't mind that, I think Timex Weekender offers quite a few different options in terms of different case sizes and in terms of different styles. However, I do have another suggestion if you're into Timex watches and feeling a little bit more brave. On a used market, flea markets, eBay, forums, things like that, you can pick up a vintage 1970s hand-wind Timex watch for around $15-20 US. You can even find them cheaper, like for instance this one right here. Give me a second. I picked up this watch at a flea market for around $5. I spent about $30 on the service and it's been working great ever since. It's a fantastic option if you're into vintage watches and if you're feeling a little bit more brave. So if you're feeling a little bit more brave, go with the vintage hand-wind Timex watch. These watches can be found all day long on forums, eBay, and flea markets. Or if you just want a brand new watch, Timex Weekender would be my number 5 suggestion. Number 4, a Swatch. On this list, I wanted to include at least one Swiss-made watch, and I think Swatch fits perfectly. Now, you're not getting an automatic or a hand-wind movement, of course. It's going to be quartz and it's going to have a plastic case. A lot of people might not be into that. However, Swatch watches do offer quite a few different design options. They are funky, they are stylish, and the quality is pretty good. Of course, recognizable name, recognizable designs, and it's just cool to have a Swatch on your wrist from time to time. I think at around $50 you can't go wrong with the Swatch. My favorite in this price category is the Swatch Unisex reference SUOB714. It has a black dial, basically has black everything except for the set of hands. The set of hands is gray, semi-skeletonized, and you also get a red seconds hand and some red markings on the dial. I think this watch looks pretty funky, pretty cool. I think you'll be satisfied with this watch at that $50 price point. Number 3, I had to include at least one Chinese watch, but instead of including at the 3rd position one Chinese watch, I'm going to include 3 Chinese watches in the 3rd position. All right, so first one is going to be Cadisen. My pick is this one here with the sapphire crystal Seiko NH36 movement. Although I do think that the crystal is not sapphire, it could be. I actually reviewed this watch and it said that it's a sapphire crystal. I didn't do any testing, but I think it might be a mineral crystal. Either way, around $50-60 for a Seiko NH35 movement. Fairly stylish design. I don't think you can go wrong. Another suggestion would actually be a Guanchen watch. A very similar styling to this one, has a Seiko NH35 movement. A pretty iffy leather strap. In fact, all of these watches will have a pretty iffy leather straps. However, at around $50-60, I don't think you can go wrong with those type of specs. And my 3rd suggestion in this price category with Chinese watches will be a Star King watch. Now, they have a few different options. I recommend this one here with a sapphire crystal and their own in-house high beat movement. So the movement beats at 28,800 beats per hour. So it has a nice sweeping motion to that seconds hand. Again, I reviewed one of their watches. Actually, I reviewed 2 of their watches and I was fairly impressed with the quality and with the kind of specs that you get for around $50. Now, the Cadisen and the Guanchen you can buy from GearBest or from AliExpress. I would recommend GearBest. I always had good experience with them. The Star King you can actually pick up through Amazon, which is a nice bonus because Amazon return policy and exchange policy is super easy to implement in case something is wrong with your watch. And that's going to be my one word of caution about these Chinese watches. They are a bit risky to buy because sometimes you don't know what you're gonna get. Sometimes you get a great watch and sometimes you get a watch that arrives broken. I can't tell you the number of divisive comments I get every time I review one of these Chinese watches. Some people are super satisfied, really happy that they spent 50 bucks and got a watch with specs of a much more expensive watch. And many people are dissatisfied because they receive a watch that's broken, a watch that broke after a week, a watch with major quality control issues. So just keep that in mind if you're picking one of these watches up. The way I would do it, before you take off any stickers, before you put the watch on your wrist, really inspect it, make sure that everything works. And if something is wrong with the watch, contact either GearBest or Amazon or whatever you bought the watch and try to get a refund or an exchange. Number 2. Now this watch could also be number 1. I switched the first and the second place a few times in my head before filming this video, but at this moment I feel like this watch is the number 2 and the number 1 will be number 1. So number 2 is Vostok Amphibia. What? Oleg included a Vostok Amphibia on his list? Surprise, surprise. If you are following the channel for a while, you know that I'm a big fan of Vostok Amphibia watches. I think for around $50, the value for money proposition is pretty much unbeatable. You get 200 meters of water resistance, some might argue even more than that, amazing history and great heritage with the brand. You get stainless steel case and an in-house automatic movement that's really easy to regulate in case yours is not very accurate, because let me just tell you this, right out of the box the movements are not regulated, so chances are you probably will have to regulate your movements. However, the good news is it's very easy to remove the case back, and regulating the movement is super easy. You can search YouTube for ways to do that, and there are plenty of videos showing you how to regulate your Vostok movements. On top of all of that, there is pretty much an unlimited number of different case options, different bezel options, different dial options, and so on. You could also customize your watches because there's a huge modding community for these Vostok watches. So if you never experienced a Russian watch, I strongly recommend to go in at that $50 price point. I don't think you will be disappointed. And number 1, actually, can you guess what is my number 1 choice for a watch under $50? I'll give you 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. All right, it's G-Shock. What? That might be surprising to a lot of people because, to be honest with you, I'm not a huge fan of digital watches. In fact, 4 out of 5 watches on this list were analog style watches. I just prefer them. However, G-Shock offers undeniable value. Now, I'm not gonna recommend you buy this one here, the one that I own. This one has the solar power battery. It also has a controlled radio signal time accuracy. It's a little bit more expensive at around $85, $90. I would recommend actually a different reference, the G-Shock DW5600E. That version is identical to this in terms of looks, has a little bit of different coloring, and the functions are all the same except for it doesn't have the solar battery and it doesn't have the radio controlled timekeeping, which you don't really need, to be honest. So why is the G-Shock number 1 choice? I think the full package that you receive with this watch is pretty much unbeatable. First of all, the watch is indestructible. I did so many activities in mine, I did so much testing, people were freezing them, dropping them from incredible heights, and the watches still keep working. I want to say tick, but they don't actually tick, but they still keep working as intended. Number 2, you do get 200 meters of water resistance. The styling of the watch is pretty good. In fact, G-Shock has sold over 100 million copies of their G-Shock watches, which is the most sold watch in history, and I think that's for a very good reason. On top of the iconic status, you do get all the functionality that you would need in a watch. You get the stopwatch, you got the timer, you got multiple time zones, day, date, year, has a good background lighting, so pretty much is the only watch that you will actually need, so to speak, to go on with your life. They're not a perfect watch. However, if you don't have one in your collection yet, for under $50 to buy such an iconic watch, I think it's a no-brainer. I appreciate you watching this video until the end. Now, this list was made obviously from my point of view and with the watches that I have first-hand experience with, that I have owned before. I don't like to suggest or talk about watches that I never owned, because for that you can just Google the watches yourself and look at all the specs. You don't really need me to tell you about the specs of watches that I personally never owned. So I only talked about the watches that I have owned before, that I have had experience before. Now, of course, in my life, I didn't own all the watches under $50, so I'm sure there are some watches that I have missed. If there are some watches that I've missed and you really want to suggest them, please do leave those suggestions in the comment section below. I really appreciate your comments, plus you're helping out the community. By the way, today on my wrist, I'm wearing my Tissel Submersible. Of course, it's a Rolex Submariner homage. I did a full review of this watch. I'll link that video in the description below. Also in the description, there is a secret link. Have a look if you're curious. Thanks for watching. I hope you had fun. I hope you enjoyed yourself, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Bond, do you want to try a strawberry for the first time? Yeah? What is this?